The maintenance shaft smelled like burnt copper and fear. Danny Reeves pulled himself forward on his elbows, his small flashlight gripped between his teeth, checking power conduits that nobody else could reach. Somewhere above him, 3,000 refugees waited to die 0.6 days ago. The Wandering Grace had been a functioning cargo vessel. Now it was a tomb drifting through empty space, 47 light years from the nearest station. The fusion drive was dead. The backup systems were failing. And every engineer on board had already given up. Danny was not an engineer. He was listed on the crew manifest as auxiliary maintenance, which was a polite way of saying he was the human they hired because humans worked cheap and never complained. The Bravani engineers looked at him the way mechanics look at a broken wrench. Useful sometimes, but not something you would trust with real work. That he reached the end of the shaft and found what he expected. Another fried conduit. Another small piece of the ship dying. He marked it on his tablet and began the long crawl back. When he emerged into the main corridor, a small feathered face was waiting for him. Mira was a Kalani child, barely reaching Danny's waist, with bright blue plumage that had grown dull over the past week. She was a refugee, separated from her parents during the evacuation, and she had attached herself to Danny for one simple reason. He was the only crew member who smiled at her. "Is the ship still broken?" she asked in her chirping voice. "Still broken," Danny said. He knelt down to her level. "But we're working on it. The tall ones say we're going to die." Danny felt something twist in his chest. The tall ones don't know everything. He walked with her toward the cargo bay where the refugees had gathered. The scene inside hurt to look at. Families huddled together under emergency blankets. Children crying in languages Danny did not understand. The air recyclers were struggling, and everything smelled stale and desperate. An announcement echoed through the ship. Captain Yeneth's translated voice, calm but tired, explaining that food rationing would increase again. Danny watched the hope drain from alien faces all around him. He left Mira with a Kalani family who had agreed to watch her and made his way to the engine room. The massive space was filled with Bravani engineers, their forearms moving over holographic displays, running simulation after simulation. Chief Engineer Paula stood at the center, his gray skin pale with exhaustion. "The quantum containment matrix has failed completely," Paula was saying to a group of officers. "The fusion core is unstable. Standard procedure requires immediate ejection before it breaches." "And without the core?" Captain Yeneth asked. She was a Siluri, her bioluminescent body contained in a mobility suit filled with water. Her glow had dimmed over the past days. 12 hours of emergency power. Not enough to reach any station or beacon. Silence filled the room. Danny stood at the back, listening, thinking about all the times he had heard engineers say something could not be done. "What if we don't eject it?" he asked. Every head turned toward him. Palitha's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a Bravani expression of confusion mixed with irritation. "The human mechanic speaks," Paloth said. "Perhaps you did not understand. The core will breach. It will explode. We will all die." "I understood," Danny said. "But what if we use the breach? Control it somehow. Control a fusion breach." Paloth made a sound that Danny had learned was Bravani laughter. "Impossible. The mathematics do not support any survival scenario." "Mathematics," Danny repeated. "Right." He returned to his quarters that night and sat on his bunk, staring at the wall. Around him, the ship groaned and shuddered. Somewhere in the distance, a child was crying. Danny pulled out his personal tablet and began searching through old files. Earth files, documents he had saved years ago, back when he was a salvage worker in the asteroid belts, back when he learned that the difference between life and death was often just stubbornness and duct tape. He found what he was looking for. Apollo 3 Spatsmitais. The nuclear submarine accidents. The miners trapped underground for 69 days. Stories of humans who faced impossible situations and refused to die. That he started making notes. Wild ideas. Desperate calculations. Things that would make any proper engineer laugh. But Danny was not a proper engineer. He was a human from a death world, raised in salvage yards, trained to fix things with whatever he could find. He had rebuilt his first engine at 14 using parts from 3 different wrecks. He had kept a failing shuttle alive for 6 days with nothing but wire and hope. The Bravani looked at the dying ship and saw mathematics. They saw simulations and probability curves and acceptable losses. Danny looked at the dying ship and saw a puzzle. A broken thing waiting for someone stubborn enough to fix it. He worked through the night, filling page after page with notes. By morning, his eyes were red and his hands were shaking from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But he had something, a plan so crazy that no simulation would ever predict it. Because the plan required something no simulation could account for. It required a human willing to die, trying. Danny looked at his notes one more time, then stood up and walked toward the captain's quarters. 3,000 refugees were counting on someone to save them. The engineers had given up. The mathematics said there was no hope, but Danny Reeves had never been very good at mathematics. Captain Yeneth's office was small and filled with the soft blue glow of her aquatic suit. She floated inside the transparent container, her fins moving slowly, her large eyes watching Danny with an expression he could not read. Chief Engineer Poloth stood beside her, his 4 arms crossed in what Danny had learned was Bravani skepticism. Neither of them looked happy to be here. "You requested this meeting," Captain Yeneth said. "Speak quickly. We have much to do before the end." Danny placed his tablet on the desk between them. "I have a plan." "We have reviewed all plans," Poloth said. "There are none that work. You haven't reviewed this one." Danny pulled up his notes. "The fusion core is unstable. You want to eject it. But ejecting it means we lose all power and drift until we die. What if instead of ejecting it, we use the instability?" Palath's eyes blinked rapidly. "Explain." "We induce a controlled partial breach. Not a full explosion, just a controlled release of plasma. We channel that plasma through the secondary venting systems and use the electromagnetic force to push the ship forward. Like a rocket." The silence in the room was heavy. Captain Yeneth's glow flickered, which Danny had learned was a sign of strong emotion. "That is insane," Poloth finally said. "The variables involved are beyond calculation. The plasma would need constant adjustment. The radiation would kill anyone in the engine room within minutes." "Kill any Bravani," Danny corrected. "Maybe not a human." Both aliens stared at him. "Humans evolved on a high-radiation world," Danny explained. "Our sun is harsh. Our planet has thin atmospheric protection in many regions. We develop cellular repair mechanisms that other species don't have. I'm not saying the radiation won't hurt me. I'm saying I might survive long enough to make it work." "Might," Poloth repeated. "You're proposing to risk your life on might. I'm proposing to give 3,000 people a chance instead of 0. Captain Yeneth moved closer to the glass of her suit, studying Danny with those large, unblinking eyes. "Why would you do this? You are not one of us. These refugees are strangers to you. Most of them have never even spoken to you." Danny thought about the question. He thought about Mira waiting outside, her blue feathers dull with fear. He thought about the families in the cargo bay, holding each other in the dark. He thought about every time an alien had looked at him like he was less because he came from Earth, because he was human, because his species was young and rough and uncivilized. "Because someone has to," he said simply, "and I'm the only one who can." Poloth made a frustrated sound. "This is not engineering. This is gambling. Where I come from, we call it field repair." Danny met the Bravani's 4 eyes. "On Earth, we have a saying. Necessity is the mother of invention. Your simulations can't account for human stubbornness. They can't account for someone inside the engine room, making adjustments in real time, reacting to problems as they happen. Because that person would be dead. Maybe, but I've been almost dead before. I'm still here." The room fell quiet again. The ship groaned around them, metal stressed beyond its limits, systems failing one by one. Somewhere in the distance, the emergency lights flickered. Captain Yeneth spoke softly. "In my culture, we have a word for those who sacrifice themselves for others. It does not translate well. The closest meaning will be light bringers. Those who burn so others may see." "I'm not trying to burn," Danny said. "I'm trying to fix a broken ship. It's what I do." "You are a maintenance worker," Poloth said. Auxiliary maintenance. You're not qualified for this. I rebuilt my first fusion engine at 14. I kept the dying shuttle alive for 6 days with nothing but wire and hope. I've been fixing things that shouldn't work since before you were born. Danny's voice was steady. I'm not asking you to believe in the mathematics. I'm asking you to believe in me. Another long silence. Captain Yeneth and Pauloth exchanged a look that Danny could not interpret. Finally, the captain spoke. You have 18 hours to prove the concept can work. Build a small-scale test. Show us the controlled plasma release is possible. If you succeed, we will proceed with your plan. And if I fail, then we eject the core and spend our final hours in peace. Danny nodded and gathered his tablet. At the door, he paused and looked back. Thank you for listening. I know you think this is crazy. It is crazy, Pauloth said. But I have learned something about humans in my years traveling the galaxy. Your species does not seem to understand the concept of impossible. Perhaps that is a flaw. Or perhaps it is why you are still alive. Danny smiled slightly. We call a hope. He walked out into the corridor where Mira was waiting. She looked up at him with her bright eyes, feathers ruffled with anxiety. Are you going to save us? She asked. Danny knelt down beside her. I'm going to try. And trying is the first step to doing. He had 18 hours. 18 hours to build something that had never been built, to prove something that could not be proven, to convince a ship full of aliens that one stubborn human could do the impossible, that he got to work. The cargo bay had become a workshop of desperation. Danny stood at the center, surrounded by piles of salvaged parts, broken equipment, and aliens who had never worked together before in their lives. Word had spread through the ship. The human had a plan. The human needed help. They came slowly at first. A pair of Thornaki refugees, massive beings with stone-like skin, offered to lift heavy equipment. A Kalani engineer who had been a shipbuilder before the war brought her tools. A young Bravani student, not yet graduated, volunteered to run calculations. Danny looked at them all and felt something he had not expected. Hope. All right, he said. Here's what we need to build. A plasma channeling system that connects to the secondary vents. A manual override interface that doesn't exist on this ship. And a control station inside the engine room that can survive temperatures hot enough to melt standard alloys. That is 3 impossible things, the Kalani engineer said. Her name was Sitha, and her green feathers were streaked with gray from age. Then we better get started. The work began, and immediately, the problem started. The Bravani student, Kellier, needed precise plans before he could do anything. He kept asking for specifications, measurements, exact parameters. The Kalani worked differently, building by instinct, adjusting as they went. The two groups argued constantly. The Thornaki were strong enough to move anything, but their massive hands could not handle delicate components. They stood helpless while others struggled to lift things they could have carried easily. Danny watched the chaos for 10 minutes. Then he stepped into the middle of it. Stop, he said. The aliens fell silent. You're all trying to work the same way. That's not going to happen. You're different species. You think differently. And that's not a weakness. It's exactly what we need. He pointed at Kelly. You need plans? Good. Your job is to take what Sitha builds and turn it into calculations the ship's computer can understand. You're a translator. He pointed at Sitha. You build by instinct? Perfect. Build fast, build rough, and let Kellier clean it up mathematically. He pointed at the two Thornaki. You can't do delicate work. So don't. Your job is to move the heavy pieces and hold things in place while others weld. You're our foundation. The aliens looked at each other, then back at Danny. How do you know this will work? Kellier asked. Because I've done it before. On Earth, we call a team. Different people, different skills, one goal. Danny picked up a welding torch. Now let's build something impossible. The hours passed in a blur of sparks and sweat. Danny moved between groups, solving problems, translating approaches, showing the Bravani how human intuition worked, and showing the Kalani how to document their instincts. Pauloth arrived after 4 hours. He stood at the edge of the chaos, watching with his 4 eyes. Danny expected criticism. Instead, the chief engineer rolled up his sleeves and joined the work. I still think this is insane, Pauloth said as he helped calibrate a sensor array. but I have never seen species work together like this. How do you do it? I don't see species, Danny said. I see people who want to live. That's enough. Mira appeared with water and food packets, delivering them to workers who had forgotten to eat. The little Kalani girl moved through the chaos like she belonged there, and Danny realized she was smiling for the first time in days. HFY Hour 12. The plasma channeling system was complete. Rough, ugly, held together with welds that would make any proper engineer cry. But complete. HFY Hour 15. The control station was built. Danny had designed it himself, using heat-resistant materials salvaged from the ship's cooking equipment and emergency suits. But they still needed the manual override interface. And that was a problem. This system doesn't exist, Kellier said, staring at Danny's sketches. The Wandering Grace was never designed for manual plasma control. There's no interface to build. Then we build one from scratch. From what? We've used everything we have. Danny looked around the cargo bay. Then his eyes fell on the pile of discarded electronics in the corner. Communication devices, navigation backups, entertainment systems donated by refugees who no longer cared about music or games. From that, he said, the next 3 hours were the hardest of Danny's life. He sat on the floor, surrounded by components, building a control panel from pieces that were never meant to go together. His hands cramped. His eyes burned. Twice he almost gave up. Mira sat beside him, passing him tools, watching with wide eyes. Is that going to work? She asked. It has to. He finished with 20 minutes to spare. The interface was ugly. Cables hung loose from the sides. The display flickered. But when he connected it to the test system and pressed a button, the plasma readings responded. Pauloff stared at the device in disbelief. You built a working control interface from entertainment systems and cooking equipment. I built it from what I had. Danny stood up, his legs shaking from exhaustion. That's what humans do. We don't wait for perfect. We use what's available. Captain Yeneth arrived as they finished the final tests. She watched the plasma channel in controlled bursts through the test system, exactly as Danny had predicted. It works, she said softly. The impossible works. Danny nodded, but he did not celebrate, because the test was the easy part. Now came the real challenge. Now he had to enter the engine room. Now he had to survive. The radiation suit was heavy, but Danny barely noticed. He stood before the engine room door, staring at the warning signs flashing red in 6 different languages. Behind him, the bridge crew watched through the monitoring system. Around him, the ship waited. Communication will be difficult once you're inside, Pauloff said through the intercom. Radiation interference. You'll be mostly alone. Story of my life, Danny said. Danny. Palitha's voice changed, softer now. I was wrong about you. About humans. I want you to know that. Tell me again when I come out. He opened the door and stepped inside. The heat hit him first. Even through the suit, it pressed against his skin like a living thing. The engine room was vast, filled with machinery that hummed and groaned with failing power. At the center, the fusion core pulsed with unstable light, beautiful and deadly. Danny moved to his station, the control interface he had built sitting on a makeshift platform. He connected the cables with hands that did not shake, though they wanted to. Beginning procedure, he said into his communicator. Starting plasma release in 3, 2, 1. He pressed the button. The ship screamed. That was the only word for it. Metal twisted. The deck beneath his feet vibrated so hard his teeth rattled. The fusion core flared, and a stream of plasma burst through the channeling system he had built. Readings are wild. Palitha's voice crackled through static. You need to adjust the flow rate. Danny moved before the words finished. His hands flew over the controls, making adjustments based on feel rather than numbers. The plasma stream steadied, then began to flow smoothly toward the secondary vents. But something was wrong. The temperature was rising faster than expected. Warning lights flashed across his control board. Through the static, he heard Pauloff shouting something, but the words were lost. Danny was alone. He closed his eyes for a moment and thought about all the broken things he had fixed in his life. The shuttle that should have killed him. The mining rig that failed at the worst possible moment. Every time, the universe had thrown something unexpected at him. Every time, he had adapted He opened his eyes and got to work. The plasma flow needed more power to the electromagnetic containment. He rerouted it from the backup lighting system. The containment field was fluctuating. He manually adjusted the frequency using sounds rather than instruments, listening for the harmonic that meant stability. His suit's radiation alarm started beeping. He ignored it. The temperature inside the engine room climbed past safe limits. Sweat poured down his face, soaking into the suit's inner lining. His hands were starting to shake now, not from fear, but from the heat affecting his muscles. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." And then everything went wrong at once. The plasma containment began failing faster than his adjustments could compensate. The stream became erratic, threatening to break free and flood the room with superheated death. On the bridge, alarms would be screaming. Captain Yeneth would be preparing to eject the core, to lose everything. Danny looked at the failing system and saw only one option. The plasma needed a ground, something to stabilize the electromagnetic field long enough for the containment to recover. That he looked at his hands. Humans conducted electricity. Humans survived things that killed other species. That he reached out and grabbed the exposed coupling. Pain exploded through his body. For 3 seconds that felt like eternity. Danny Reeves became part of the circuit. Electricity and plasma energy flowed through him, grounding through his boots into the deck. His vision went white. His heart stuttered, and the readings stabilized. He let go and collapsed against the control panel, gasping. His hands were burnt. His whole body felt wrong. But through the static, he heard Palitha's voice, shouting with something that sounded like joy. "The flow is stable. Danny, you did it. The engines are responding." Danny forced himself upright. The control board showed green. The plasma was flowing correctly. The electromagnetic drive was pushing the ship forward. "What's our status?" he managed to ask. "We're moving. 8 hours to the station at current speed." "Danny, we're going to make it." Throughout the ship, refugees felt the change. The vibration of engines working. The sensation of movement after days of drifting. In the cargo bay, families held each other and cried. In the corridors, people who had prepared to die began to hope again. In the engine room, Danny slid down the wall and sat on the floor. His suit's radiation alarm was still beeping. His hands throbbed with burns. His heart beat in an irregular rhythm that worried him. But he was smiling. "Danny, your vital signs are concerning." Palitha's voice came through. "You need to evacuate the engine room." "Not yet," Danny said. "The system isn't fully stable. I need to monitor it. Make sure nothing goes wrong. You're killing yourself." "I'm doing my job." He stayed at his post for another 2 hours, making adjustments, nursing the impossible system he had built. When the readings finally held steady without his intervention, he allowed himself to stand. His legs gave out immediately. He caught himself on the control panel, breathing hard. "Okay," he admitted. "Maybe I could use some help now." The engine room door burst open. Pauloth and 2 Thornaki rushed in, radiation suits hastily donned. They caught Danny as he fell and carried him out into the corridor. The last thing Danny saw before consciousness slipped away was Myra's face, her blue feathers bright against the corridor lights, her small hand reaching out to touch his. "You did it," she said. "You saved us." Danny tried to smile, but darkness took him before he could. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines that measured Danny's fading heartbeat. He lay on a bed too large for him, designed for species twice his size. Tubes and wires connected him to alien equipment that struggled to understand his human biology. Dr. Vashiel, a Valani healer with pale blue skin and 6 delicate fingers on each hand, moved around the bed with growing frustration. "His cellular damage is extensive," she said to Pauloth, who had not left Danny's side in hours. "Radiation poisoning at levels that would have killed any of us instantly. But he's still alive," Pauloth said. "Barely. And I don't know how to help him. Human biology is a mystery to me. His cells are doing something I've never seen before." Outside the medical bay, a crowd had gathered. Refugees who had heard what the human did. Crew members who had watched him walk into death and somehow survive. Mira sat on the floor against the wall, refusing to leave, clutching a small blue feather that she had pulled from her own wing. Captain Yeneth arrived, and the crowd parted silently for her. She floated in her mobility suit, her glow dim with exhaustion, but her eyes alert. "How is he?" "Dying," Dr. Vashiel said bluntly. "His organs are failing. His heart rhythm is unstable. He absorbed enough radiation to kill 10 Bravani engineers." "Then why isn't he dead?" The doctor paused, looking at the medical readouts with confusion and wonder. "Because his body won't give up. His cells are repairing themselves at a rate I've never documented. Damaged tissue is rebuilding. His immune system is fighting the radiation poisoning like it's an infection. Is that normal for humans? I don't know. There's almost nothing in the medical database about human physiology. Your species is so new to the galactic community." Pauloth stepped closer to the bed, looking down at Danny's pale face. "On Earth, humans evolved under constant threat. Their planet tried to kill them every day. Disease, predators, natural disasters, radiation from their sun. They survived because their bodies learned to adapt, to heal, to refuse death." "Deathworlders," Captain Yeneth said softly. "We use that term as an insult, but perhaps it should be respect." Danny stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Ship," he whispered. "The ship. The ship is fine," Pauloth said quickly. "We're 4 hours from the station. Everyone is safe." Danny's eyes closed again, but a small smile touched his lips. "Good. That's good." Dr. Vashiel worked through the night, consulting with the medical database, trying treatments designed for other species and hoping they would work on a human. Most did nothing. Some made things worse. But slowly, impossibly, Danny's vital signs began to stabilize WY morning. The news had spread throughout the ship. The human was going to live. Mira was the first allowed into the medical bay. She climbed onto a chair beside Danny's bed and placed the blue feather on his pillow. "What's this?" Danny asked, his voice weak but clear. "Protection," Mira said. "My mother told me that when someone is hurt, you give them a feather to keep them safe. I don't have my mother anymore, but I have you." Danny looked at the small feather, then at the small girl who had given it. Something in his chest that wasn't damaged by radiation ached in a different way. "Thank you," he said. "I'll keep it always." Throughout the day, visitors came. The Tharnaki workers who had helped build the plasma system. Sitha, the Kalani engineer. Kellier, the young Bravani student. They brought small gifts and grateful words. They touched his hand and thanked him in their own languages. Pauloth came last when the others had gone. He sat in the chair beside the bed and was quiet for a long time. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "When you first joined this crew, I saw you as inferior. A lesser being from a primitive world. I was wrong." "You weren't completely wrong," Danny said. "Earth is primitive. We don't have the technology you have, the knowledge, the history, but you have something we don't." Pauloth leaned forward. "I've been thinking about what you did. Not just the technical solution, but how you did it. You didn't have the right tools, so you built them. You didn't have the right materials, so you improvised. You didn't have a team, so you created one from species who had never worked together. That's just how humans solve problems. No, that's how humans survive. Your species crawled out of caves on a world that wanted you dead. You spread across your planet, then beyond it. And now, one human mechanic saved 3,000 lives using cooking equipment and entertainment systems." Pauloth made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Do you know what the other species call humans behind your backs? Deathworlders, primitives, newcomers. Some do, but others call you cockroaches." Danny raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment. On Earth, cockroaches are nearly impossible to kill. They survive everything. Radiation, poison, heat, cold. They adapt, and they endure." Pauloth met Danny's eyes. "Today I learned that humans are the same, and I think the galaxy should be afraid." Danny smiled weakly. "We're not that scary. You walked into a radiation storm that would have killed any of us. You used your own body as an electrical ground, and now you're lying here, healing from wounds that should have been fatal, asking about the ship." Pauloth stood up. "Trust me, Danny. You're terrifying. In the best possible way." The station came into view 6 hours later. Danny was awake enough to watch through the medical bay window as the massive structure grew larger, its lights welcoming them home. 3,000 refugees would find safety there. New homes, new lives, new beginnings. And one human mechanic would find something he hadn't expected when he took this job on an alien cargo ship. He would find a family. 3 months had passed since the Wandering Grace limped into port. The ship had been repaired, upgraded, and returned to service. The refugees had been resettled across a dozen worlds, finding new homes in a galaxy that had seemed ready to let them die. Danny Reeves stood in the doorway of a classroom, watching 20 young engineers of 6 different species work on a broken engine component. They argued, debated, and collaborated in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The radiation had left its marks. Gray streaks ran through Danny's hair now, and his left hand had a tremor that came and went. The doctors said he would never fully recover. The doctors also said he should have died, so Danny didn't put much faith in what doctors said. The power coupling is misaligned, a Bravani student said. We need to recalibrate. Recalibration will take too long, a Kalani replied. We should rebuild the coupling entirely. We don't have the parts for that. Danny stepped into the room. What do you have? The students turned, their arguments forgotten. Even after 3 months, they still looked at him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The human who had done the impossible. The mechanic who had saved 3,000 lives with salvage and stubbornness. We have the broken coupling, the Bravani said. Some spare wire. Emergency sealant. Then use what you have. Danny walked to the workbench and picked up the broken part. The coupling doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to work. What's the minimum it needs to do? The Kalani student thought for a moment. Transfer power from the backup generator to the primary systems. So you need a bridge. Something that conducts power from point A to point B. Danny set down the coupling and picked up the wire. You don't need to rebuild the coupling. You need to bypass it. The students watched as Danny demonstrated, his trembling hands still steady enough for delicate work. In 10 minutes, the engine hummed to life. That's not in any textbook, the Bravani said. No, Danny agreed. It's in every broken thing I ever fixed on Earth. When you don't have the right solution, you find a different solution. When the rules don't work, you write new rules. He had been offered many things in the past 3 months. Medical retirement with full honors. A promotion to chief engineer on a luxury liner. A position at the most prestigious engineering academy in the sector. He had turned them all down. Instead, he traveled from station to station, teaching young engineers what no simulation could teach them. How to think without instructions. How to build without perfect materials. How to solve problems that had no solutions. The students called it the Reeves method. Danny just called it common sense. After the class ended, he walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. His tablet buzzed with a new message, and he smiled when he saw who it was from. Myra's letters arrived every week without fail. She lived on an agricultural world now, with a family who had adopted her after the Wandering Grace landed. Her drawings had improved, though Danny was always depicted much taller than he actually was. I saw a ship today that looked like the Wandering Grace, her latest letter read. I told everyone about you, about how you saved us. My new mother says you must be very brave. I told her you're not brave. You're just stubborn. That's better. Danny laughed and typed a reply. You're right. Stubborn is better. Stay stubborn, little one, and keep sending drawings. Paula found him there an hour later. The Bravani engineer had accepted a position at the station, training the next generation of technicians. He and Danny had written several papers together, translating human intuition into formal engineering methodology. The academic community was fascinated. Danny found it slightly embarrassing. You have a visitor, Pauloff said. Captain Yeneth floated into the observation deck, her globe bright and healthy. The Wandering Grace had a new crew now, and she was preparing for a long voyage to the outer sectors. I have a proposition, she said. My new ship needs a chief engineer, someone who can teach my crew to think differently, someone who has proven that impossible is just another word for difficult. I'm not a chief engineer, Danny said. I'm just a mechanic. You were a mechanic. Now you're a legend. Yeneth moved closer, her large eyes reflecting the starlight. The Galactic Engineering Council has created a new designation because of you. Deathworld Engineer, first class. You're the only one who holds it. Danny looked at his trembling hand, at the gray in his hair, at the stars that had almost killed him. What would the job involve? Travel, teaching, occasionally saving ships that shouldn't be saved. Yennefer paused. In visiting Mira whenever we pass her sector, I've already plotted the routes. Danny smiled. You planned this. I planned this the moment you walked into that engine room. Anyone willing to die for strangers deserves the chance to live for them too. He looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, 3,000 people were building new lives because one stubborn human had refused to accept the mathematics of death. When do we leave? He asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll send the details to your quarters. Yennefer turned to go, then paused. Danny? Thank you. For everything. She left, and Danny stood alone with the universe. His tablet buzzed again. Another letter from Mira, sent just minutes ago. I forgot to tell you, it read. I'm learning to fix things. My new father has a tractor that keeps breaking. I told him I would repair it. He asked if I knew how. I told him no, but I know someone who taught me that not knowing is just the beginning. Danny read the words twice, then typed his reply. First rule of engineering, everything breaks. Second rule, that's what we're here for. Send me pictures of a tractor. Let's see what you're working with. He put away his tablet and looked at the stars one more time. Tomorrow he would board a new ship, teach a new crew, and face new challenges. The universe was vast and full of broken things, but Danny Reeves was a mechanic from a death world, and fixing broken things was what he did.